Good morning and welcome. My name is Angela Davis and I'm the 4am Quilter. Have you ever made an unconventional quilt? Something completely out of your comfort zone. It doesn't follow the rules. The lines are a little crooked, the shapes are a little odd. Something that's unexpected, unconventional, non-traditional. Today I'm going to give you 5 tips on how to make an unconventional quilt. Tip number 1. Use fabrics you have on hand, but over time start collecting scraps from the scrap bin at your local store. Start collecting the non-traditional fabrics. These type of fabrics would include lightweight upholstery fabric, drapery fabric, denim, corduroy, linen, velvet, anything that you normally would not put in a traditional quilt. Tip number 2, preparing your fabric. Well, first you're going to cut the legs off any old pair of jeans or corduroys or slacks you might have that you want to include in the quilt. After you cut the legs off, you're going to cut down one of the seams. And please don't use your seam ripper for this. It's much easier to just cut out the seam than to try to rip out the seam using your seam ripper. Next, you're going to cut the jeans or the corduroy or the upholstery fabric into random squares and rectangles and strips. Tip number 3, seam allowance. Now in regular quilting, seam allowance is an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. Not with your untraditional, unconventional quilt. Because you're dealing with different types of fabric textures that may be thicker or have a different type of weave than regular quilting cotton, you want to be sure to do a 1/3 to a 1/2 inch seam allowance. This gives the seam a little more room . Number 4, we are so used to hearing, make sure those points match. Make sure those seams butt up against each other. Make sure to use an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. Well, this type of piecing, you're going to do just the opposite. Your seams are not going to match. They're not always going to butt up against each other. And you can't always press them using the traditional guidelines in quilting. In other words, when you press, sometimes you have to press where the seam is naturally wanting to lay. So in this type of sewing and piecing, you want to be sure to think about when you get it on the ironing board, which way does the seam lean toward? That's the direction you're going to press in. Number 5, embellishing. Embellishing can mean a number of different things. You can add the embellishment as you're seaming it, such as a strip of lace, or a strip of crochet, or a strip of a satin ribbon, or you can add your embellishment at the end. And next time you're in the thrift store or the antique shop and you see those wonderful vintage handkerchiefs, lace around them, hand crochet around them, embroidery, collect a few. Have fun with it. Get those all out. Get them pressed, get them ironed, lay it out, arrange them, take a picture. Rearrange it, take a picture again, and decide, is that where you want your final layout to be? Have fun with those doilies and handkerchiefs. Have fun with the designs. Use the pockets in the denim to display those handkerchiefs and linens. and then make your quilt. This quilt started out as just a denim quilt, and it evolved over time. So again, in that unconventional, untraditional way, I included things like linen checkered napkins, pieces and parts of old drapes, corduroy, and yes, there's a couple polyester blends in there as well. I had so much fun making this quilt. So for all the quilters out there who don't always like to match up the seams, who don't always like to do an accurate quarter inch seam allowance, or who maybe can't even make an accurate quarter inch seam allowance, it's very difficult for me to do a straight line. It really is. I've always enjoyed making scrappy quilts, and this is probably one of the ways that I enjoy most making a quilt. The other thing that I want to remind you of, and this is tip number 6. I thought there was going to be 5 tips, but there's actually 6. You want to think about the filler. Now, the denim quilt, unconventional quilt such as this, can be very heavy to work with. It's not your regular cotton. It's going to have different weights and different textures. And with that being said, you might want to think of backing it with just maybe a minky or maybe one of those plush fabrics, or you can just back it with flannel. I decided to back mine with a vintage sheet, and I had an old flannel sheet in the basement in sort of a medium dark blue. I was actually thinking about getting rid of it because it was all faded. And when I was trying to decide on which sheet to use, I came across that old sheet. And then it hit me. I'm going to use that as my filler. Flannel makes a great filler when you want something a little lightweight. So next time you want to make a quilt, explore the possibilities of random cutting. Don't think about measuring. Don't think about those accurate quarter inch seam allowances. Enjoy the process. Enjoy the creativity. And when you hit a roadblock, like I've done in this quilt, trim it down, put a lace doily over it. Maybe this seems a little bulkier than that one. I'll put a doily on top of it and nobody will be the wiser. For the embellishing, I'm just hand stitching around my motifs. And for this part of the process, grab your favorite beverage. Iced tea, lemonade, iced coffee, whatever your choice is. But make sure to keep yourself hydrated. I have my coffee right here. When you're laying out your pieces, try folding the pieces so that you're accentuating that flower or that embroidery stitches. Lay them out so that you're complementing that handkerchief the best. I'm not being fussy with these stitches, but I am trying my best to do a blind stitch, and this is an applique stitch. So what I'm doing is, it's difficult to see because I have white thread. Right where that thread comes out, I'm going to go into the background, and when I come up, I'm going to grab the edge of that fold. and I'm going to pull through. And then right where this thread came out, I'm going to go into the background. And then when I come up, I'm going to grab some of that fold where the top piece is. And that's a hand applique stitch. The smaller the stitch is, the better your applique piece is, but you don't want them to be so small that they start puckering. And I'm not going all the way through to the back. I'm only going in to the filler. I'm not going all the way to the back where the backing is. How many of you don't use thimbles when you're doing regular stitching? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I think it depends on the thread and what I'm doing at the time. Now I need to work this way. Have to turn you, okay? Now, when you're doing this, I've got my hand underneath. I was actually thinking about machine appliquing all of these on top, but at this point the quilt is big and bulky and just wasn't sure I wanted to go there. So I'm just gonna sit here and do my applique stitch, enjoy my coffee. I'm gonna put sauce and meatballs on the stove later for the kids. Last week we went to the farmer's market, the kids and I and my mom, and we got corn on the cob and apples. It's a little early for apples, but apples always taste better from the farm, don't they? So last week I made hamburgers and corn on the cob. That was good. So this week I'm making sauce and meatballs. When you're picking out these old handkerchiefs and napkins, if there's a spot, don't worry. You can always tuck it under, you can cut it off. You know, there's always ways to hide those little imperfections, okay? This one, some of this red bled onto another section, I think just a little bit right here. But I think it's going to be okay because most of it is on the fold. There's just a little bit right here. And I'm okay with that. You know, I'm okay with that. You know, when you're collecting vintage linens, that's what happens sometimes. It is such fun though, collecting the vintage linens. I didn't realize when I pulled this one out of the bin until I was pressing it to get ready that it said best wishes. So this must have been, you know, one of those special handkerchiefs that maybe was for a newlywed couple as a part of a shower gift. That sort of thing. And this looks like that was all done by machine. That's not hand embroidery. And I'm okay with that too. Sometimes they're just so pretty, and I mean those rosebuds are adorable. There's 6 of them. And then the rose in the middle has some nice texture there. So my name's Angela Davis, and I'm the 4M Quilter, where I share, care, and create with you. Have fun making your next non-traditional quilt. And remember, like, comment, and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss my next video. And please leave a comment. I love hearing from you. Have a great day and enjoy. That's gorgeous. Gorgeous, gorgeous. Well, I'm going to continue my hand sewing. Then I think I'm going to knot the rest of the quilt. Thanks so much for joining me today.